Thanks for coming out on a rainy evening. Promises to be a good evening here. I'm pleased to introduce David Berman tonight. David Berman was born in Williamsburg, Virginia in 1967. He went to school at the University of Virginia and received an MFA degree from the University of Massachusetts in approximately 1995. He doesn't seem to know and we don't seem to know. Sometime around there. His first book, Actual Error, was published by Open City Books in 1999 to wide acclaim. I don't use that phrase loosely. With enthusiastic reviews in the New York Review of Books, Gentleman's Quarterly, Publishers Weekly, Spin, and many other magazines. My own memory of David is rather vague. He was a ghost-like figure who rarely spoke. And yet, in workshop, there would be these poems before me by one David Berman, and they would be perfect. I didn't want to change a word of them. And I would look up stunned, and the sphinx of a ghost would be staring off into space, and I couldn't tell if he'd even written them or just willed them to materialize to taunt me. All kidding aside, it's a real pleasure to welcome David Berman back and to congratulate him on his success as a poet. I love David's poems. They're funny and haunting. There's always some knot of logic to them that makes their world seem real and even heartbreaking. I hope you'll forgive me, David, for quoting Billy Collins here. Billy Collins wrote, and this was before he was our poet laureate. David Berman possesses the most engrossing new poetic voice I have heard in many years of hard listening. When I first read him, I thought, so this is the voice I have been waiting so long to hear, a voice I wish in some of the poems were mine. Any reader who turns into his snappy, offbeat meditations is in for a steady infusion of surprises and delights. See, that's pretty nice after all. I think David is going to read some new poems tonight, and I, for one, am excited to hear them. Thanks for coming, David, and welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Jim. I didn't know you had a subscription to GQ. I'm going to read some poems that I wrote this summer. Never read them before, and haven't read them in a week. So I'll try to make some changes on the spots, but let's see what happens. This is one I wrote last week called Away Games. Sometimes, you're writing and you're reading, of course, at the same time. And this is one example of where I think two books. I was reading, how do you pronounce it, Knut Hamsun? I was reading Mysteries by him, and I was also reading, which is like The Jerk set in a 19th century Norwegian fishing village. And then I was reading a Don Powell novel at the same time, which is like a bitchy New York City novel from the 1930s. And it wasn't until after I wrote it that I thought maybe that both of them had made it in somehow, but it's called Away Games, and this is how it goes. So often it's the unhappy little sounds city dwellers make when they're waiting in line that sends a man into these green and black mountain towns, where it's always January inside the furniture, and even the life of a mushroom can be classified as a performance to the steady minds that train in frozen parlors until they're finally able to recall each momentary phase of a candle flame as a distinct historical object. Unlike the larger urban areas where saxophone solos appear as often and unexpectedly as the devil in Polish fiction, And one's upstairs neighbor so commonly publishes a personal newsletter headlined, "Fighting to get started tonight about 8 p.m." These little towns have no bothersome folklore, no special customs, and no traditional songs, unless you count the creak of adjoining matter. These are places where people treat each other with respect. No one pressures anyone else to dance, offers unwanted magazine tips on caring for the swamp flower of materialism, or tries to say hello to you through a mouthful of blood. The oldest downtown shops are really just caves at the base of the mountain where one can buy various lotions for the treatment of bankruptcy and divorce, or find a barbershop whose proprietor gladly carves each customer's hair to look exactly like his own. Understanding how all this came to be usually means a visit to the local library, whose ancient books smell like wild carrots, and where it's not uncommon to hear an old animal call coming from deep within the stacks, which is just the sort of off-putting experience that might persuade you to end your trip sooner than planned, especially if it were to join already nagging city worries about a business problem left unsolved on the surface of your abandoned desk, or unease over how the nails have been mumbling in the carpentry at the inn where you've been staying. And so it's not until you've packed your bags, changed your return ticket, and are rolling backwards through the train yard that you finally have a chance to wonder how you'll explain your strange new haircut to the others at the office Monday morning, or ever shake off that image of chicken blood sparkling on a stump. The Old Next. This is a poem where I hadn't written a poem for a while, sitting down to write a poem. You gotta write a poem about writing about poems. So, in the morning you get there, okay, here it goes, the Old Next. The situation is blood work, mister. Sitting at a desk in the morning, watching the sun turn in the spokes of a fruit tree, I'm chanting composition, horseshit, magic, as a backbeat to the wide and sorrowful mystery. I am constantly wanting myself to realize something, to regard this crisscrossing severalness with untold wads of concentration, and hear what the fourth mind says to the third, when anvils of sunlight fall through high gymnasium windows onto a bust of Fichte sculpted out of cat food. Something you know is right because it looks good written down. Like a two-headed pig named Reflections, or deep showbirds launched in basic game light, a wig and a service revolver, a small mountain flower, and all the luck in the world. This is a poem called The Diet That Amazed Europe. Let's just face it, I'm going to start every one of these poems with, this is a poem that's called The Diet That Amazed Europe. It's my corporate corruption poem. And my sister lives in Florida. She lives in the Panhandle, in the Floribama area, and there's so many creepy men that live there, and she's a single woman, and she's always dating crackheads and military deserters, and I'm always trying to get her out of there. And so I had this feeling of wanting to do a portrait of a northern Florida town where people go to hide incognito. The Diet That Amazed Europe. The waiter removed my plate of broiled duplex lamb chops and brought out the equipment for dessert wine as the sunset's dominant embers cooled over the water, and I consoled myself with the thought that at least I had not stabbed a man in Orlando, sold phony deeds for acreage on the moon, or had intercourse against a rotting balustrade with Johnny Paycheck's ex-wife like some of the fellows I knew at the bar. My mind built a brick wall in the air as my dinner companion continued to list the merits of the hometown that had banished him, and two men in turtlenecks, who appeared as if they'd misplaced their spacecraft, leaned over the terrace and watched the seawater below sizzle to a perfect stop. When the federal investigation into my commercial diet gained steam, I quickly took on the name Charlie applied a fake beard over my real one, and with a little help from the book How to Hide Your Assets and Disappear, disembarked at this seaside town governed by the single caution light that hangs over the beach road like a sleepy eye. All kinds of fugitives have settled here, taking advantage of the social instability to be found near and around state lines. One of my neighbors made a fortune building executive moats before the accompanying bacterial diseases felled several sets of vain grandchildren. Another was driven from civilization simply for producing seahorse pornography. From my table, I could wave to any number of tax cheats, inside traders, plagiarists, racketeers, and embezzlers, each mauled by his or her own daydreams, and if lucky, deposited here with a good sum of money and loose plans to follow summer all around the world. On the town, I always wear a grotesque carnation, the badge of the harmless moron, and explain to strangers that I'm a writer of teleplays who simply loves to watch his characters improve. What was my crime, noticing that hot bodies had become the new coins of the realm? I had been anxious to help my countrymen fit into phone booths. I named my plan the diet that amazed Europe, and sales were unstoppable until the very newspapers that had celebrated my ascendance began calling me a predator and a positive-thinking jackass. The prosecution put plenty of fat, sobbing witnesses on the stand, apparently instructed to not shut up until my life was destroyed. So maybe I said some words that were not right on the dime, and maybe my customers' biomass had not melted off as fast as it had on the Abe Lincoln diet or with jogging in a jug. But had I sold expired milk to the schools, or gone on TV to say that white folks should only get in car accidents with other white folks? Had I called for the beheading of a lieutenant governor or publicly noted that third world butchers make first world party animals? I had done none of those things, and yet there I sat, trapped in some overweight Planos version of Far Away, looking like a man who, having walked out of a Father's Day sale circular, cannot shake the terrible feeling that he's being chased down the road by a huge electronic buffalo. Stars glittered in the sky like midnight publicity, and my dinner companion leaned into his explanation of how tennis courts are graphs of atheism. The people at the bar were feeling hilarious, and as I took my scotch and made my way through the long-haired men and short-haired women, I reminded myself that I had enough money to live on for 7 years. I would find a way, hadn't I always? After all, I hadn't been caught dunking foreign tourists in the pool, or crippled other men with powerful and arbitrary high fives. Had I built an arena for crushing employee suggestions or walked around with my balls in a sort of wheelbarrow? No, I had done none of those things. I took the marble beach stairs and walked across the sand, straight into the ocean, like a man in a teleplay, coaxed by circumstances to the very edge of the world. I stood waist-deep in the cold seawater, breathing in the smell of jet exhaust and coconuts, wondering if I might have underestimated eternity, until a huge wave came out of nowhere and knocked my drink out of my hand. Children's book. My children's book will commence with a moment of remarkable traction when a semicircle of eyeshadow cannons, 2 work dog musketeers drafted from the realm of functional unwanted, and an adolescent clerk with the ghost of his father living inside his haircut, meet up in the misty borderlands at the climax of authorial impairment for a journey deep into the tiebreakers. Like the wigs of continental congressmen, the clouds in my children's book will hang over a housing development called Scotland Groin, whose residents will suffer from an insomnia caused by the wearing of top hats, greatly complicated by random explosions coming every few pages from a nearby paper bag factory. There will be plenty of lads with boiled cheeks, the requisite foolish old woman riding an ironing board out to sea, as well as terrific deer salons with bramble perimeters and a battleship made of harmonicas wheezing in the bay. There will be kid ideas woven into the story, like kick a rock, change the world, and a disembodied voice that solemnly asks, who can apologize for the way things are after a group of senior citizens is abruptly turned into wild animals? The characters will travel through through 8-room forests and meet snowfalls, hauling convivial objects that have many times survived their ownership, up wind-licked heights and over grassy hemispheres, until they are so far outside the administered world, with all their wristwatches gone dark, and all their cheeks scratched by rain, in a hard-to-see place where no rules obtain, and someone else's dreams dying in their hearts. The Irish Space Program. The day was hot and it was not cold. He sat by a stream east of the trees, the very picture of invisible labor, and the old price ranges of folklore, like a hermit in a romantic ballad. I guessed him dreaming of unnoticed things or unnoticed aspects of noticed things, in that meadow whose fundamental beauty was commensurate with its uselessness, as so often was, the case. It was the wonderful overgrown field, ever redolent of an abandoned stage, where I had written Death Rents a Flower and Reactions from a Snowbound Academy on vacation the year before. Finding it occupied, I continued down the shabby road, past a barn that seemed to hide things not worth finding. There was a waterlogged tavern door lying flat on its back in the grass. With a stick, I engraved curse words on the surface of a forest pool. Oh, why should I lie to you? I was desperately unhappy. I could hardly believe how uncomfortable my clothes had become. Was I to return to the wobbling candlelight of the inn to gamble for nightingales with West Country earls? These Irish forests were just voids with bears inside. I could not have felt more harassed if it had been raining carrots. I turned on my heels and headed back, determined to eject that hermit from my thinking spot. Hatred came flipping down my forearms. Any refusal would be met with super refusal. It was not for nothing that I called my hands the Wild Fives. But upon returning, I found my pastoral arena depopulated once again. I took a seat and turned an ear to the birds inside the sky. So only 10 bad minutes had been appended to my life. Leaves fell in soft corkscrews. A lone rabbit hopped by. The day was hot and it was not cold. This is a poem I actually started writing when, however many years ago I was here, 7 years ago, I wrote and wrote a couple lines of it, and then I just finished it this week in preparation for this. So let's see if we can do it. It's called Late Homework. The Constitution. My family had lived in Nevada for 5 generations, and when the dust finally settled on our traces, all that remained was an impossible nickname to live down. My folks met up in the 60s, both caught up in the phrase craze, and active participants in the street peddler revival that had all of adult America up in arms at the time. Dad was in a garage band that had scored a minor regional hit with South Central Nevada Woman. Mom made extra money sewing miniskirts from Volkswagen van window curtains and attended to an elderly goldfish named Gay Rights. It's funny how my childhood memories are all scotched by the lens flare that was such a big part of 1970s cinematography. I remember my father's deep fascination with the unlikely, how he coached a team of infant bodybuilders and built ant farms with inspirational LED subtitles running across the base. Both of them loved auctions for the way they combined shopping and gambling, and firmly believed that the back pain they both suffered was a message from God that only heavy painkillers could decode. Of course they had friends, Mrs. Something next door, I can't remember her name, and never really got a good look at her face as there was usually a glass of white wine in the way. But she and Mom shared the same psychoanalyst and made a practice of leaving each other notes in the couch cushions. Dad was an exceedingly cheerful man. He even found falling down accidentally to be an agreeable experience. He wore sweatsuits topped with wide neckties, and most nights lifted me onto his knee to read fairy tales from the 1950s, featuring winsome animals that cried teardrops the size of dinner rolls. When Sister left for college, my parents converted her bedroom into guest quarters. She never forgave them for that. I'd take a jug of orange drink and a goblet in there to draw portraits of Frankenstein, skim my mother's novels for paragraphs of intercourse, and practice cussing. Oh my God. I don't think I have the end of this poem. It finishes really good. Oh no. Well, can we move on? It has a sad ending. About the party. I loved seeing you the other night, and I think everyone noticed, which was the first time, I believe, since the Oak Street Psychic Fair when your boyfriend claimed I spread unhappiness with my harmonica playing. People see each other all the time, and they can't always figure out how to act. So it often seems as if the dandelions growing silently behind the high school are the only truly outstanding reaction to existence. And perhaps because I thought I had no argument with the world, until the backyard mosquitoes started penalizing my hands, and Wayne of Wayne's Hair Systems and Jimmy Food Hill wouldn't let me speak to you. It came as such a horrible shock to notice you looked so damn beautiful beneath Bob's silver maples that I about shit my heart out. The high numbers. I liked to fall asleep to the sound of the dishwasher pounding itself, as I was into a certain amount of Andrew Jackson worship at that age, and knew I needed time alone to unschool the rainbow dumbness in my heart if I was ever to gain possession over my own storyline and perish in the badass world historical death that I dreamed of. Like other young men, I dreamed of perfect fighting on leagues of clover, of hunting naked and terrified school teachers on the mesas of western states that looked like empty calendar squares in the beat-up road atlas where I sketched my pitiless campaigns. Sometimes, falling asleep with the atlas on my chest, I dreamed I'd been buried alive and calmly tunneled down through the earth towards my beloved Chinese food. I feared nothing, leastwise the filmic zombies and Egyptian mummies who looked like they'd just bump into you if you stopped running from them. My bedroom drapes were like two mathematicians at work on the same problem, and I remember lying beneath them, counting to 100 for the first time, knowing that soon I would be able to keep going without stopping. I imagined that as an adult I would count into the very high numbers, leaving the rest of civilization behind to bitch about traffic as if they were not a part of it. I would single-handedly repopularize the wishbone formation, storm the beaches of Waikiki with my hard-bitten legion of Hawaiian secessionists, or if nothing else, control horrible CIA lions from a remote location with a joystick. Each Christmas, my grandmother gave me a set of gloves and a ski mask as if to suggest that I begin robbing convenience stores. Not only that, but I was repeatedly served bad meals, the eating of which was like pushing against a wall. I would have nothing to do with nuts, which were clearly baby wood. And shuddered at the sight of the cornucopias and Thanksgiving illustrations, which reminded me of the tunnels in space from which I was certain stepfathers emerged. I tried to regard most of these procedures with equanimity. After all, this was probably the world, and it looked like those who were already here had been testing life on themselves for years. That they had placed confusion on a pedestal, screwed themselves by worshiping the impenetrable, and then lamely tried to broker a love and loyalty clause into the deal as a gesture of further abdication was no business of mine. I know what you're thinking. People should file their childhood under W for who cares. But ease off, friend, for the mind must attend to the things it is just beginning to understand, like how it could grow up to be the soft, ineffectual synthesis of untold compromises that I am today. The operations manager of a small business that makes water sweaters for winter swimming. A man who tosses off sentences like, the key to the liquor cabinets underneath the fern, and wonders and worries about outliving the actuarial tables. Sometimes when I can't sleep and I'm out for a walk, the old fierceness rises up inside me, and I say, I believe I can show this town something. But it always crumbles under the knowledge that all of us are existing at the mercy of tomorrow, stumbling forward under the weight of our individual lives, and the fear just leaves me gasping. I'm just going to read one more. This is, I want to thank everybody for coming. It means a lot to me, and it's weird right now. Shadow of World War III. Take care of yourselves. My life at home during banking hours. For a solid month, I tried to think of something new to say about rivers. I called the newspaper to find out how many horses were left on Earth, and numbly watched mosquitoes swarm over a pile of high-heeled shoes, while my parallel collies hunted in the corners. At least I was not in the line of work that had me spending most of my day avoiding God. My desk held painfully complicated surfaces, jammed with shadow cassettes, black bear theory, and drinking water. There was the occult sadness in a name like Jesse Winchester, and the wind howling on the answering machine when I returned home from daydreaming in a margarita shop. All the blessings and counter-blessings that moved in my mind like FM waves from a butter churn, and granted me the sight of parallel collies standing on a hilltop, and the rain falling on the United States while it wonders, what is the United States? I used to sing a song that went, no more springs, no more summers, no more falls. I believed I was nearing the morning when nettles would pour from the shower head, when I would be ripped out of the world for recasting the blues in plastic. I thought I would break where I'd been bent, that I would lose the game inside the game. But that has not happened, and now I don't expect it ever will. Thanks a lot. Bye.